Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Schenectady. My name is Robyn Salvin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm serving as your worship associate today alongside the Reverend Lynn Gardner, she, they pronouns. We gathered this morning on the lands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, or Six Nations, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, Cayuga, and later Tuscarora. Specifically the Mohawk, the Kenyan Keaha, or people of the Flint. Gathering on this spring day, let us vow to care for the earth and remember the lineages of stewards of these lands. If you are here on Zoom, not in Schenectady, you are invited to acknowledge in the chat the lands on which you reside. If you are visiting us for the first time, we extend an especially warm welcome. We know it isn't always easy to come into a new place. We hope you'll find today's message meaningful and the people here friendly and approachable. The house I grew up in, out in Western New York, was surrounded by farmland and woods. If I looked out the front door, it was flat farmland, the way one pictures a stereotypical landscape of the Midwest. But behind our house was the escarpment, where glaciers met the land during the Ice Age, creating a hill that was also wooded. My sister, Renee, and next door neighbor, Brenda, and I would play in those woods endlessly. It was actually kind of idyllic. Renee and Brenda always wanted to make houses under the trees and put on shows for the squirrels and birds. I wanted to ride my bike through the forest. But I was the youngest, so we put on shows. We also stomped around in the stream between our houses that I later learned also carried sewer water. So much for idyllic. But my childhood was one that constantly intertwined with the earth. I heard Earth's call over and over. That time in the woods, having picnics in our yard, picking the raspberries that surrounded our big garden, swinging on the swing attached to the big maple in our backyard, falling on a yellow jacket's nest while dancing around in the rain in the front yard and getting stung 11 times. Nature. These are the things that I would picture whenever anyone mentioned climate and nature until I was about 40 years old. A relatively narrow picture, but beautiful nonetheless. And then I started traveling overseas. Many of you know that as a high school social studies teacher at Niskayuna, I've taken student groups on international trips for about the last 12 years. I am that annoying person who will take any opportunity to talk about her latest travel adventure. And through this group travel, as well as my own adventures, I've been able to broaden my interactions with the earth. When I took 20 students and 2 other adults to the Galapagos Islands in the summer of 2022, we had the opportunity to swim with tortoises, sea lions, and sharks, all in their natural habitat. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Snorkeling and watching tortoises and sea lions playing with each other in a cove of San Cristobal was surreal. It was a little nerve-wracking because you didn't know when an enormous sea lion was just going to sidle up next to you and kind of side-eye you and be like, what are you doing here? But they pretty much ignored us and went about their day. When we were snorkeling through a channel with sharks, we were advised to just keep swimming because if we stopped and our legs dropped, it could interfere with the sharks. I took interfere to mean my feet would become their lunch, so I heeded that advice. On a separate trip to Machu Picchu in Peru, we got to hear the Earth's call in the way the Incans did in the 15th century. This experience was much more meditative than the sharks. There was a solemnity to it that heightened my appreciation of and connection to the enormity of what we were seeing. It was an opportunity to see how a civilization lived on the earth in a way that served its needs without devastating their natural surroundings. And while technological advancements over the last 600 years have obviously made it more difficult to strike this balance between societal needs and care for the earth, It does make me more mindful of my own actions and their impact on nature. I've experienced the impact of human degradation of the earth and the devastation of climate change when I snorkeled with a group at the Great Coral Reef off the coast of Australia in 2014. Although I was nervous about swimming in the open ocean, I was really excited to see the bright colors of the reef that I had heard about most of my life. However, while enduring a 2-hour-long, super choppy boat ride out to the snorkeling site that rivaled the Barfarama scene in the movie Stand By Me, hear this call, those little patches you wear on your neck to prevent motion sickness, they actually work. I was like the only person left standing. I learned that because of the excessive boat and human pollution from the hordes of people snorkeling to see the beautiful corals, it has, in fact, made them less beautiful. The vibrant colors have been sapped from major portions of the reef. We did that. And while I was appreciative of the experience of being out there, I had to sit with the hard truth that I was contributing to the problem, that I was disrupting the aforementioned balance. It has made me more cognizant of how my actions impact the planet. I am trying to appreciate and to take actions to minimize or eliminate that negative impact. While I hope that sharing these types of experiences with my students will help them to hear the Earth's call, many of them already hear it and are alarmed by it. Whenever I start a new class, I have my students take a political quiz called I Side With. It's pretty thorough and user-friendly for senior level students and helps them get a sense of their place on the ideological spectrum. While I never ask them their results or to disclose their political affiliations, I do ask them to reflect on their results, including which issue they are most passionate about. In the last couple of years, the answer to this question has overwhelmingly been climate. Again, I don't ask students to disclose their political leanings, but some do. And I've seen that concern about the climate, at least amongst my students, is not determined by party or ideology. They get it. They are worried. Many are worried into action. They hear the Earth's call.
Hello, I am Chris Hamelink, and I've been a member here for 40 years. My remarks today are about the cry of the earth. About 10 years ago, I took a great course here called The Long, Strange Journey, The History of Unitarian Universalism. On the last day of the class, our instructor, Ernie Hall, asked an important question. 100 years from now, your descendants can look back at you and say, why didn't you do more about fill in the blank? And we were each to answer what that issue would be. There were a lot of excellent responses. And then one voice called out, climate change. I was stunned. Yes, if we did not address the human role in climate change, what would life possibly be like for our descendants 100 years from now? I was challenged by the question. Scientists have been raising warnings about this for a long time, but what could I do? This is too big to address alone. I joined our UUSS Green Sanctuary team, and I was very glad that I did. Last week at our joint UU service here in Schenectady, the Reverend Ashley Detar Burt said that justice work is spiritual and is only effective in community. She's right. The Green Sanctuary purpose statement says, with reverence for the interdependent web of all existence, Green Sanctuary works to inspire environmental awareness, action, and justice. Responding to the climate crisis is at the core of what we do. We lead informational sessions on climate issues. We bring in speakers. We join in rallies and marches for the climate. and we advocate for actions at the federal, state, and local levels. We discuss how we can all become more energy efficient, and we encourage all of you to join in those efforts. All of this is good, but it's not enough. 9 of the last 10 years have been the warmest on record for our planet. 2023, last year, was the hottest year ever, according to NASA records. We're seeing the effects of climate change in our own lives already. And here's an example. Drew and I live on Ballston Lake, and we've been there for 40 years. Each year, like clockwork, the lake freezes over in mid-December, and the ice goes out around the 1st of April. Life on the lake is very noisy in the winter. But this winter, it was so warm that the lake did not freeze until mid-January, and the ice was all out by the end of February. Instead of 3.5 months of a winter wonderland, we had barely 6 weeks of very thin ice. No ice skaters. No families walking their kids and dogs along the lake. No cross-country skiers. No neighborhood kids playing pickup games of ice hockey. No snowmobiles. No ice fishing. And no sound of any human activity. At our cabin in Indian Lake, deer fell through the thin ice and drowned. Sometimes the cry of the earth is silence. So is this hopeless? No, there is hope. How do I know? I went to Norway. Last summer, our family took a trip to Norway, not for the environmental actions, but for their beautiful scenery. The towering mountains, their 1,000 fjords, the waterfalls, and the beautiful sea. As our plane was landing in Bergen, which is the second largest city in Norway, I saw the long line of white wind turbines spinning in the offshore in the North Sea. Once in the city, electric cars were everywhere. 1/3 of the garage parking spaces were reserved just for electric vehicles. We saw buses about every 5 minutes, and in large print on the back of each bus, it said electric. We did not see any buses that were not electric buses. 100% of Norway's electricity comes from renewable sources, hydroelectric power and wind, with a little bit of solar. Some of you may know that approximately 1/4 of the emissions for global warming come from the generation of electricity, which in so many countries is done by burning fossil fuels. In Norway, there is minimal use of fossil fuel for their transportation. Norway is rated one of the top 2 countries in the world for their environmental actions to fight climate change. How do they do this? First, they are well educated. 7% of their GDP goes to education. They follow science. They are not polarized or distracted by conspiracy theories. They do whatever they can to fight the crisis, including heavy investments to move away from the burning of fossil fuel. So yes, there is hope. We who live in the United States can learn from the example set by the people of Norway. It won't be easy. Unlike Norway, we are plagued by disinformation, polarization, and political and monetary incentives that promote fossil fuels rather than limit their use. This makes it so much harder to address the climate change. So what do we do now? 3 things. The first is vote. This November election is critical for our Earth as well as for our country. One candidate has led the largest investment ever in infrastructure for renewable energy and pledges to continue to do this. The other candidate proclaims, "Drill, baby, drill." He promises to withdraw from international agreements to fight climate change and pledges to increase the subsidies for fossil fuels and to reduce them for green energy. Vote. Number 2, become an advocate for climate justice. March, rally, write letters, make phone calls to your elected officials about these issues. Green Sanctuary helps organize these actions and will publicize them in circuits and on our email distribution list. Stop at the Green Sanctuary table in the back of the Great Hall if you are interested in more. And third, take personal action to fight the climate crisis and help the environment. You already know many things to do, but maybe you would like some more information. Green Sanctuary is sponsoring a green energy workshop next Sunday on these very issues. Explore your options for greening your home and your commute, including heat pumps, renewable energy, community solar, electric vehicles, and other possibilities. Being interdependent means that we support one another as we learn and change. This earth, this beautiful planet teeming with life, is calling to us. She is calling to you. How will you respond?
How will we respond? Indeed. Thank you. Thank you. As we consider the reflections that have been shared, I invite you to join with me in a time of our own reflections, in a time of meditation, a time of prayer, a time in which we might open our minds and hearts to awaken our senses, to fully feel the interdependence of each breath, of the many, many ways in which we are connected and depend upon one another and this earth more than we know. Spirit of life and love, we gather this morning on this Earth Day weekend holding both the joys and the sorrows of being human, the joys and the sorrows of acknowledging the state of this beautiful planet on which we live. This morning, we hold the sad and tender truth that within our lifetimes, record numbers of species have become extinct. That between 60 and 70% of animal life has decreased across the planet. We acknowledge the truth of rising sea levels, the loss of fresh water, many of us are aware and have been directly impacted by increased flooding, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, and drought. We hold in our hearts the far too many places across the earth where people are suffering, where animals and plants do not have all that they need. When our senses are awakened, when we hear the earth's call, we may need a space for grief. Let us hold that space within and among us together. And along with our grief and sorrow, the earth is calling us to gratitude and to joy. With our senses open, we may experience deep gratitude for beauty, for sustenance, for our own small shimmering strand in the interdependent web of all existence. Let us give thanks for rivers and glaciers, for deserts and meadows, for mountains, valleys, and plains, for islands and coral reefs, for rainforests and fjords. We give thanks for this amazing earth. Let us share a time to rest in the quiet. And then when Maria begins to play, you're invited to light a candle for the joys and sorrows that you may hold in your heart. Joys and sorrows for this earth. Joys and sorrows for those with whom you are connected. Joys and sorrows for all of the suffering and for all of the beauty that exist, all at the same time. At the top of each section of seats, there is a table with candles and a bowl of soil in which to rest those candles. After our time of quiet, when the music begins, you're invited to make your way, if you would like to light a candle for the joys and sorrows in your heart. For now, breathing in peace and breathing out love, let us rest in the quiet together. It is springtime. And as in every season, the earth offers experiences to fill our senses. Here in Schenectady, in the past week, cherry, plum, and other flowering trees have begun blooming in abundance. There are bright yellow daffodils and forsythia, azalea, and early tulips. And one could almost watch the landscape get greener hour by hour. Birds start singing their morning songs before dawn. And if you were to go out under one of the flowering magnolias, the sound of bees buzzing would likely greet your ears, and the soft, sweet scent delight your nose. Dandelion greens are prevalent, and their bright, bitter flavor added to a salad is one taste of spring. Yesterday afternoon, Wendy was preparing a garden bed for planting, and I was pulling weeds in our strawberry patch. It was warm enough for me to be barefoot, and the feeling of sun-warm ground under my feet brought me so much joy. Wake now, my senses, we sang earlier, and hear the earth call. Our senses can invite and allow us to connect more fully with the earth. Our senses can also bring us warnings of our collective peril. Plants and animals have been adapting to climate change and a warming world for the past few decades, sometimes in amazingly quick and abrupt ways. Thor Hansen is a conservation biologist who has studied wild bees, songbirds, rainforests, marine ecosystems, and a number of endangered species. In a recent interview with Mark Levitin of The Sun magazine, Hansen noted that it's important to remember that change is inherent and evolution is all about change. What's different now is the pace of change. In reflecting on their conversation, Levitin wrote, "Plant and animal species have undergone enormous changes in the 21st century, including mass migration, unusual adaptations, and cascading extinctions on a scale not seen since the end of the last ice age." All of these changes have been necessary largely because of human activities, often human greed, sometimes human thoughtlessness. The species that are adapting in response didn't ask if their changes would serve a particular political party's needs or interest. They didn't worry if their changes would be financially feasible or if the changes even mattered to human beings at all. The animals and plants that have adapted have done so because they can and because instinct calls them to survive. Hansen continued, "Evolution is not always this slow process that we can't really see happening. We've got changes playing out now with astounding rapidity. Biologists can see natural selection occurring over the course of one field season." Our world is changing, and rather than ignore or avoid some hard truths, we're invited to awaken our senses, to hear the earth's call, and to respond. Climate change is having an impact on everything. We are being changed too. Interdependence isn't just hypothetical. Interdependence is one of the values included in the proposed updates to the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association, or UUA. Article 2 of these bylaws will be debated and voted on in June at our General Assembly. It describes our UU shared value of interdependence this way. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships with care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. There is a lot packed into those sentences. Nurture sustainable relationships, care and respect, repair harm and damaged relationships, protect Earth and all beings from exploitation, reverence for the great web of life. What changes might we need to make to live into this covenant? Every day we make choices about what we eat, what transportation we use, how we care for our children, our elders, ourselves, how we speak to one another, and where we put our attention. Every day, we have a choice about whether we will take and consume with a sense of entitlement or receive with a sense of humility and gratitude. While this proposed language for Article 2 is new, the sense of connection, reverence, and interdependence is not. These have existed within Universalist and Unitarian traditions alongside conflicting messages of colonialism, exceptionalism, and the illusion of autonomy. While these too are part of our history, they need not be parts of our future. We too can change. We must, if we are to survive. Frank Lloyd Wright, American architect who was best known for designing buildings in harmony with humanity and the environment, was a Unitarian and expressed his theology, saying, "I believe in God, only I spell it nature." All around us, the earth is calling, reminding us that we are not alone. May we indeed honor the interdependent web of all existence, and with reverence for the great web of life, and with humility, acknowledge our place in it. May it be so today and every day. Salam, shalom, amen, ashe, namaste, and blessed be.